For 2 years, I believed my son Lucas was in the Arctic because his wife told me so. But on a rainy Tuesday, a panicked driver handed me a wet package and whispered that I must not trust her. What I found inside proved my son never left and revealed a conspiracy right under my nose. Lock your doors because what I am about to tell you will make you question the people sleeping next to you. My name is Michael Williams, and for 40 years, I made my living looking for the things other people desperately wanted to ignore. I was a structural safety inspector for the city of Seattle. My job was not about aesthetics or architecture. It was about gravity and the unforgiving nature of physics. I looked for hairline fractures in concrete foundations, the subtle bowing of load-bearing walls, and the microscopic rust eating away at steel beams. I learned early on that a building does not collapse in a single dramatic moment. It dies slowly, quietly from 1,000 small failures that go unnoticed until the roof comes down on your head. Now, at 64 years old, I was retired, but the instincts never really left me. I still saw the world in terms of stress points and structural integrity. And on this particular Tuesday morning, sitting in my usual booth at the Rust Bucket Diner, I had no idea that the foundation of my own life was about to suffer a catastrophic failure. It was raining. In Seattle, that is hardly a headline, but this was a relentless gray sheet of water that had been falling for 3 days straight. It drummed against the plate glass window beside me, blurring the outside world into a smear of charcoal and steel. I wrapped my hands around a ceramic mug of black coffee, appreciating the warmth seeping into my stiff fingers. This was my ritual. Every Tuesday since my wife Sarah passed away, I came here. The diner smelled of frying bacon, old vinyl, and damp wool. It was unpretentious and solid, much like the buildings I used to approve. I took a sip of the bitter coffee and let my mind drift to Lucas. My son was the only thing I had left that truly mattered. He was a brilliant architect, the kind of man who saw buildings not just as shelters, but as art. 2 years ago, he had landed the opportunity of a lifetime. Or at least, that was how it had been presented to me. He was working for a massive energy conglomerate called Vanguard Horizons. The project was top secret, a revolutionary sustainable living facility located deep within the Arctic Circle. I missed him. God, I missed him. But I held on to the pride. My boy was up there in the freezing white void building the future. I had the emails to prove it. Brief typed messages describing the aurora borealis, the brutal cold, and the isolation. I had the photos too, landscapes of blinding snow and ice that Vanessa, his wife, would forward to me. Vanessa. The thought of my daughter-in-law brought a familiar low-level tension to my chest, like a beam carrying slightly too much weight. Vanessa was a shark in a silk blouse. She was a high-powered real estate developer here in Seattle, a woman who moved through the world with terrifying efficiency. She was beautiful, certainly, but it was the beauty of a glass skyscraper, sleek, reflective, and utterly cold to the touch. She took excellent care of me, or rather she managed me. She ensured my bills were paid and that I saw my grandson Leo on schedule. But whenever she smiled at me, her lips would curve perfectly, while her eyes remained flat and dead like a doll's eyes. I tried to suppress the dislike. I told myself I was just a grumpy old man who missed the warmth of his own wife. Vanessa was Lucas's choice. She was the mother of my grandson. I had to trust the structure of their marriage because the alternative was too painful to consider. The bell above the diner door jingled, cutting through the ambient noise of clattering silverware and low conversation. A gust of cold, wet wind swept through the room, making the napkin holder on my table rattle. I looked up, expecting a new customer looking for shelter from the downpour. Instead, I saw a man who looked like he was being hunted. He was wearing the soaked blue and orange uniform of a delivery company I recognized, City Sprint. A baseball cap was pulled down low over his eyes, dripping water onto his shoulders. He was young, perhaps early 30s, but his face was pale and drawn, his eyes darting around the diner with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. He wasn't looking for a table. He was scanning the faces of the patrons. His gaze landed on me. He froze for a split second, and then he started moving. He didn't walk. He rushed, bypassing the "Please wait to be seated" sign and ignoring the waitress who called out to him. He came straight to my booth. "Mr. Williams." His voice was a wet rasp, barely audible over the hum of the diner. I set my coffee mug down slowly. "That is me. Do I know you, son?" He didn't answer. He looked over his shoulder at the rain-streaked window, his body trembling. It wasn't just the cold. The man was terrified. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a package. It was a small, rectangular box, roughly the size of a brick, wrapped entirely in thick, black electrical tape. It was wet, slick with rain. He shoved the package into my hands. His fingers were ice cold and shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "I cannot keep this anymore," he whispered, leaning in close. The smell of rain and stale cigarette smoke clung to him. "You are Lucas's father. You have to take it." I looked down at the black brick in my hands, then back up at him. "What is this? Is this from Lucas? Is he okay?" The driver's eyes were wide, the pupils blown out with fear. "Do not trust her," he hissed. "Whatever she tells you, do not trust her." "Who, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice rising. "What are you talking about?" "Open it when you are alone," he said, backing away. "God, I should not have done this. I have a family." "Wait," I started to slide out of the booth. "What about my son? Where is he?" "Just watch it alone," he shouted, drawing the attention of the entire diner. He spun around and bolted for the door. I scrambled out of the booth, clutching the damp package against my chest like a shield. "Hey, come back here!" I pushed through the door and stumbled out onto the sidewalk. The rain hit me instantly cold and heavy. I saw the delivery driver running across the wet asphalt toward a white delivery van parked across the street. He stepped off the curb without looking. From the left, a black SUV tore through the gloom. It had no headlights on, just a dark metallic missile cutting through the rain. It didn't brake. It didn't swerve. "Look out!" I roared. The driver threw himself backward, slipping on the wet pavement and landing hard in the gutter. The SUV roared past him, missing his legs by inches. The rush of air from the vehicle sent a spray of dirty water flying into the air. The SUV didn't stop. It accelerated, disappearing around the corner into the gray mist of the Seattle morning. The delivery driver scrambled to his feet, abandoning any thought of talking to me. He dove into his van. The engine roared to life, and he peeled away in the opposite direction, tires screeching on the slick road. I stood alone in the rain, my heart hammering against my ribs. The water soaked through my flannel shirt, chilling me to the bone, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the weight of the package in my hands. It felt heavy, dense. My structural inspector's instinct flared to life, a screaming alarm in the back of my mind. It was the same feeling I used to get when I walked into a basement and saw a crack that looked superficial to the untrained eye, but told me the entire building was shifting on its axis. The facade of my life, the retirement, the emails from the Arctic, the calm routine suddenly felt paper-thin. Someone had just taken a sledgehammer to a load-bearing wall. I looked around the street. It was empty now, save for the rain. But the back of my neck prickled. That black SUV hadn't just been a careless driver. It had felt predatory. I turned and walked to my truck, moving with a deliberate slowness I did not feel. I unlocked the door, climbed in, and locked it immediately. I placed the package on the passenger seat. It sat there, an ugly black object against the gray upholstery. I drove home. The 10-mile drive felt like an eternity. Every set of headlights in my rearview mirror made my stomach tighten. Was that the black SUV? Was it just a commuter? I kept checking my eyes, flicking from the road to the mirror and back again. The windshield wipers slapped a rhythmic, frantic beat, thwack, hiss, thwack, hiss. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the driver was crazy. Maybe it was a prank. But the weight of the package. It felt real. And the fear in that man's eyes had been genuine. You cannot fake that kind of terror. When I turned onto my street, I didn't pull straight into the driveway. I drove past my house first, scanning the curb. No strange cars, no black SUVs, just the rain-soaked lawns of my quiet suburban neighborhood. I circled the block and came back hitting the remote for the garage door. I pulled in, and as the heavy door rattled shut behind me, plunging the garage into semi-darkness, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. I grabbed the package and went into the house. The silence of the empty house usually comforted me, but today, it felt oppressive. It felt like the silence of a tomb. I didn't go to the kitchen table immediately. Old habits die hard. I went to the small utility closet in the hallway, where I kept the monitor for the external security cameras. I had installed them years ago, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Vanessa had always mocked them, calling me paranoid. I tapped the screen. The grainy black and white feeds flickered to life. The front porch empty. The backyard empty, just the swaying branches of the cedar trees. The side gate closed. I stood there for 5 minutes, just watching the rain fall on the screens, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. Satisfied, or at least as satisfied as I could be, I walked into the kitchen. I set the package down on the oak table. Under the harsh light of the kitchen chandelier, the black tape looked oily and menacing. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay." I went to the drawer and pulled out my utility knife. The blade made a sharp snick as I extended it. My hand was steady. My hands were always steady, but my insides were churning like a stormy sea. "Don't trust her," the driver's words echoed in my ears. I sliced through the tape. It was wrapped thick, layer upon layer, as if whoever packaged it wanted to make sure it never opened by accident. I peeled back the sticky black strips, revealing a soggy cardboard box underneath. The cardboard was soft from the rain, tearing easily as I pulled the flaps apart. Inside, there was a layer of bubble wrap. I pulled it aside. The breath left my lungs in a sharp, painful gasp. The room seemed to tilt, and I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. Resting on a bed of crumpled packing paper was a watch. It was not just any watch. It was a Hamilton khaki field mechanical watch with a leather strap. I knew every inch of that object. I knew the slight discoloration on the leather near the buckle. I knew the way the second hand swept smoothly around the face. I had bought this watch for Lucas when he graduated with his master's degree in architecture. It was his most prized possession. He wore it every single day. He called it his lucky charm. I remembered vividly the last video call we had before he left for the Arctic 2 years ago. He had held up his wrist, showing me the watch, and said, "Don't worry, Dad. As long as this is ticking, I'm ticking. It's coming with me to the top of the world." My shaking fingers reached out and touched the cold metal casing. It shouldn't be here. It should be on his wrist 3,000 miles away inside a high-tech facility in the frozen north. I picked it up. It was heavy, cold, and terrifyingly real. And then I saw the glass. The crystal face of the watch was scratched. Not the normal wear and tear of daily use. Someone had taken a sharp object, a rock maybe, or a nail, and deliberately carved into the glass. It was crude, jagged, and desperate. 3 letters. SOS. I stared at the scratches, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't a gift. This wasn't a souvenir sent home. This was a message in a bottle cast into a dark ocean, and it had washed up on my kitchen table. My son was not in the Arctic. He was somewhere else. Somewhere where he needed to carve a distress signal onto the one thing he loved most. I looked at the empty box, then back at the watch, and for the first time in my life, I felt the terrifying sensation of the ground beneath my feet, dissolving into nothingness. The structure had failed. The collapse had begun. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letters scratched into the glass face of the Hamilton watch. SOS. It was not a frantic scrawl. It was deep, deliberate, and etched with enough force to chip the crystal. I ran my thumb over the jagged grooves, feeling the desperation in the tactile feedback. The leather strap was still damp, smelling of rain, and something else, something metallic like iron or old blood. The structural integrity of my reality had fractured, but panic is a luxury I gave up 40 years ago when I started inspecting high-rise foundations. Panic makes you miss details. Panic makes the building fall. I forced my breathing to slow, pushing the emotional shock into a sealed compartment in my mind, and engaged the analytical part of my brain. I needed to dismantle this package like a forensic site. I set the watch aside on a paper towel and turned my attention back to the wet cardboard box. It seemed empty, just a nest of brown packing paper, but the weight was off. It was too heavy for just paper and a watch. I began to disassemble the box, peeling away the wet cardboard layers. Tucked tightly under the bottom flap, taped down with a sliver of clear Scotch tape, was a small, crumpled ball of paper. I carefully peeled it off and smoothed it out on the table. It was thermal paper, the kind used for receipts already fading and turning translucent from the moisture. It was a receipt from a pharmacy. Not a generic store, but a specific one, Pikes Peak Apothecary. My heart gave a hard, singular thud against my ribs. I knew that place. It was a local chain specific to the Pacific Northwest. I looked at the address printed at the top. It was located in Snoqualmie, a town barely 40 miles east of Seattle. I moved my finger down to the date stamp. October 20th. That was 3 days ago. My son, who was supposedly leading a revolutionary energy project in the frozen wasteland of the Arctic Circle, had apparently purchased a bottle of high-strength ibuprofen and a box of gauze bandages at a pharmacy 40 miles from my house less than 72 hours ago. And there, at the bottom, was the signature capture. It was faint, pixelated, but unmistakable to a father's eyes. A sharp loop for the L, a jagged dash for the W. L. Williams. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin, devoid of oxygen. The lie was not just a crack in the wall. It was a sinkhole opening up beneath the entire foundation. If Lucas was here, why the charade? Why the emails about polar bears and sub-zero temperatures? Why the silence? I looked back at the box. I ripped out the bottom liner entirely. There, taped flush against the corner seam, was a small, silver USB drive. It was tiny, barely the size of a thumbnail, easily missed if you were not looking for flaws in the construction. I picked it up. It was dry. I did not plug it into the laptop sitting on my kitchen counter. That machine was connected to the Wi-Fi, and if my suspicion was correct, if the delivery driver's terror was justified, then my digital footprint was likely being watched. Vanessa was tech-savvy. She worked in high-end real estate development. She knew about smart homes and surveillance. I grabbed the drive and the watch, leaving the wet box on the table, and headed for the basement door. My basement was my sanctuary. It was where I kept my old drafting tables, my physical blueprints, and my workbench. It was also where I kept the Beast, a hulking, custom-built tower computer I had assembled 10 years ago for running complex structural load simulations. It ran an old stable operating system, and most importantly, its wireless network card had been physically removed years ago. It was air-gapped, completely severed from the outside world. I descended the wooden stairs, the smell of sawdust and dry concrete greeting me. I pulled the chain on the overhead bulb, bathing the room in stark yellow light. I sat down at the workbench and powered up the Beast. The cooling fans whirred to life with the sound of a jet engine taking off. I waited for the boot sequence, my fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the desk. When the desktop finally appeared, I inserted the USB drive. A single folder appeared on the screen. No name. Just a date, October 21st. I opened it. I expected a video. I expected to see Lucas's face explaining everything. But the folder was empty of media files. There was only a single text document labeled log.txt. I double-clicked it. A stream of raw data filled the screen. It was not a letter. It was a GPS data log, likely pulled from a tracker or a smartwatch. Rows and rows of timestamps and coordinates. October 20th, 2025, 14, 02:15, UTC, -47.5, 289, north 121.8254 west. October 20th, 2025 14, 1522, UTC, -47.5, 291, north 121.8252 west. October 20th, 2025, 1430, 05, UTC, -47.5, 288, north, 121.8255 west. I stared at the numbers. I spent 40 years reading land surveys and site plans. I did not need a map to know what I was looking at. 70 degrees north. That is the Arctic Circle. That is where the sun does not rise in winter. That is where Vanguard Horizons claimed their facility was located. 47 degrees north. That is Washington State. That is the Cascades. That is home. The data went back 6 months. The coordinates barely moved. They clustered tightly around a single location deep in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, an area known for dense forests and private estates. My son had been stationary for half a year, trapped in a radius of less than 500 feet. The logic of the deception began to unravel in my mind, and with it, a cold fury began to crystallize. I thought about the emails, the photos. I closed my eyes and summoned the image Vanessa had sent me 2 weeks ago. It showed Lucas standing in heavy snow gear goggles on his forehead, a vast expanse of white behind him. He was smiling, giving a thumbs up. I visualized the shadows in that picture. In the photo, Lucas's shadow had been short, pooling directly around his boots. I opened my eyes and grabbed a pencil and a scrap of paper. I did the mental geometry. I had calculated sun angles for building shadows 1,000 times to ensure zoning compliance. At the Arctic Circle, the sun sits low on the horizon, even in summer. The shadows are long, stretched out like taffy. To have a short shadow, the sun must be high overhead near the zenith. That is physically impossible at 70 degrees north. I slammed my fist onto the workbench, the sudden violence of the motion making the pencils jump. "You idiot!" I hissed at myself. "You blind, sentimental old fool!" The photo was a fake. Or rather, it was staged. It was likely taken on a mountain pass right here in Washington during a heavy snowfall, or perhaps at a ski resort. The lighting was wrong. The physics were wrong. But I had never questioned it because I wanted it to be true. I wanted my son to be the hero, the explorer. I had let my pride blind my professional instincts. Vanessa. The name tasted like bile in my throat. She had been the conduit. Every update, every "he is too busy to talk," every "the satellite uplink is down due to a solar storm." It was all her. She had been feeding me a steady diet of poison, and I had thanked her for it. Why? The question circled my mind, but I pushed it away. Why did not matter yet. Where and how were the only questions that mattered now. I looked at the screen again. The last log entry was from yesterday. The device, whatever recorded this, had stopped transmitting or been destroyed. I needed to verify this. I needed to look the liar in the eye, or at least hear her voice, and see if the cracks in the facade were visible now that I knew where to look. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over Vanessa's name. I took a deep breath, composing myself. I had to be the inspector again. When you suspect a contractor is cutting corners with cheap concrete, you do not storm in screaming. You ask polite questions. You apply pressure gently and watch where the stress fractures appear. I dialed. The phone rang 3 times. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was bright, cheerful, and sickeningly smooth. It was the auditory equivalent of a fresh coat of paint over a rotting wall. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. I was proud of how steady my voice sounded. It was the same tone I used when telling a developer his foundation was 3 inches off grade. "I am sorry to bother you at work." "Oh, you are never a bother, Michael," she said. I could hear the click-clack of a keyboard in the background. "Is everything okay? Did you need me to pick up anything for dinner tonight? I was planning to grab some Thai food. No, I am fine, I lied. I was just sitting here drinking my coffee watching the rain, and I got this sudden wave of missing Lucas. I know the connection is usually bad, but I was wondering if we could try to call him just for a minute. It has been months since I heard his voice. There was a pause. A silence that lasted exactly 2 seconds. In my line of work, we call that settling time, the moment a structure adjusts to a new load. "Oh, Michael," she sighed, the sound dripping with performative sympathy. "I miss him too. You have no idea. But I got an email from the site commander this morning. There is a massive blizzard hitting the station. The comms tower is completely iced over. They said they are going to be in a blackout for at least another 48 hours. "A blizzard," I repeated. "In October." "The Arctic is unpredictable," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Climate change, you know, the weather patterns are all over the place." "Right," I said. "Of course. Unpredictable." "I will tell him to email you the second the lines are back up," she promised. "He asked about you in his last message, you know. He said he hopes you are taking your blood pressure medication." The lie was so specific, so tailored to manipulate me, that I almost laughed. Lucas never worried about my blood pressure. He worried about my knees. He knew I had bad knees from 40 years of climbing ladders. He would never ask about my blood pressure. "That is good of him," I said. "Well, give him my love when you can." "I will. Love you, Dad." "Goodbye, Vanessa." I ended the call and set the phone down on the workbench next to the Hamilton watch. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The structure was condemned. There was no saving it. Vanessa had not just lied. She had constructed a complex, multi-layered reality to keep me docile while my son was being held captive less than an hour's drive from my front door. I looked at the receipt again. Pike's Peak Apothecary, gauze, ibuprofen. Lucas was hurt. He was close. And he had managed to smuggle this package out through a terrifyingly nervous delivery driver. But there was one thing that still nagged at me. The delivery driver had said, "Do not trust her." He had been terrified of being seen. And then, he had been nearly run off the road by a black SUV. If Vanessa was willing to lie about where her husband was, what else was she willing to do? I looked up at the ceiling of the basement, listening to the rain drumming on the roof 2 floors above. I felt exposed. If she was lying about the Arctic, she was controlling the information flow. And if she was controlling the information, she was likely controlling the environment. I stood up and walked over to my tool wall. I bypassed the hammers and the wrenches. I reached for a small black handheld device stored in a padded case on the top shelf. It was an RF detector, a radio frequency sweeper. I used to use it to find live wires behind drywall, but it had a secondary setting for detecting transmission signals. I turned it on. The needle flickered in the green. I needed to go upstairs. I needed to sweep my own home. Because if the cracks were this deep, the rot wasn't just in the foundation. It was in the walls. It was in the air I was breathing. I grabbed the watch, the receipt, and the USB drive, shoving them deep into my pocket. I turned off the basement light, plunging the room back into darkness, and began to climb the stairs. I was not just a father anymore. I was an inspector entering a condemned building, and I had to tread very, very carefully. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The sound, usually a cheerful chime that signaled the arrival of my grandson, now sounded like a perimeter alarm being tripped. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. The house felt different. Since the discovery in the basement, the air inside seemed heavier, pressurized, as if the walls were leaning in to listen. I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my flannel shirt, and forced my face into the mask of a tired, grieving grandfather. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Vanessa stood on the porch, shielded by a massive black umbrella. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a camel-colored trench coat that probably cost more than my truck belted tightly at the waist, and leather boots that shone despite the weather. Beside her, my grandson Leo was jumping in a puddle, his yellow raincoat a bright spot in the gray afternoon. "Grandpa!" Leo shouted, launching himself at my legs. I caught him swinging him up into a hug. He smelled of rain and strawberry shampoo. For a second, just a second, the darkness receded. "Hey there, little engineer," I said, ruffling his damp hair. "How was school?" "Wet," he giggled. "Hello, Michael," Vanessa said. She collapsed the umbrella with a sharp snap and stepped inside, bringing a gust of cold air with her. She smiled, and I saw exactly what Sarah had warned me about. The lips curved upward, revealing perfect white teeth, but the muscles around her eyes remained completely relaxed. There was no crinkle, no spark. It was a facial expression executed with the precision of an architectural rendering. Come in," I said, stepping back. "It is nasty out there." "It is relentless," she said, slipping off her coat. She smoothed her hair, not a strand out of place. "I can only stay a minute. I have a board meeting at 6 and I need to get Leo settled with the nanny before I go." I watched her move. She walked with a confident, predatory grace, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. She moved like she owned the place, and given what I suspected, perhaps she thought she did. "I was actually hoping to talk to you about Lucas," I said, keeping my voice casual. I led them into the kitchen. The package from the delivery driver was hidden safely in the basement safe, the table wiped clean of any evidence. Vanessa paused, her hand resting on the back of a chair. "Oh, did you remember something to tell him?" "No," I said, walking over to the coffee pot. "I was thinking about Christmas. I know it is early, but if he is really stuck up there in the ice, I want to send him something." I knitted him a scarf. Well, I tried to knit. It is ugly, but it is warm. I wanted to mail it out tomorrow so it gets there before the holiday rush. It was a test. A simple stress test on the narrative she had built. Vanessa did not even blink. She shook her head with a sympathetic pout. "Oh, Michael, that is so sweet. Really it is. But you cannot send packages to the site right now." "Why not?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee to hide the tremor in my hands. "Even the military allows care packages." "It is not about permission. It is about logistics," she said smoothly. Vanguard Horizons has the facility on strict biosecurity lockdown. They are worried about invasive species or contaminants getting into the core samples. All personal mail has to go through a decontamination facility in Anchorage, and the backlog is 6 months long. It would just sit in a warehouse. It was a beautiful lie. Detailed, logical, and completely unverifiable for a layman. If I had not seen the GPS log showing my son was 40 miles away, I would have believed her. "I see," I said, feigning disappointment. "That is a shame. I just wanted him to have something from home." "I will tell him you were thinking of him," she said. She turned her attention to the kitchen counter. I had deliberately left a stack of papers there. It was a mix of junk mail and my monthly bank statements. I watched her from the corner of my eye as I handed a cookie to Leo. Vanessa drifted toward the counter. It was subtle. She did not lunge. She just leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms, appearing to relax. But her eyes dropped. I saw her gaze flick rapidly across the papers, reading the balances, checking the headers. She was assessing my liquidity. She was checking to see if I had made any large withdrawals, or if I had hired a lawyer. "Are you managing okay, Michael?" she asked, her eyes still on the papers while her face turned to me. "Financially, I mean. The house is big to maintain alone." "I manage," I said, my voice turning gravelly. "I am just an old man with simple taste, Vanessa. I do not spend much." "Well, if you ever need help managing the accounts, you know I can handle it for you," she offered. "It can be confusing. All those numbers." "I am fine," I said, perhaps a little too sharply. I softened my tone. "I am fine. I like keeping track. It gives me something to do." She smiled again, that dead, shark-like smile. Of course. Come on, Leo. Mommy has to go make some money. Leo hugged me tight. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, kiddo. I walked them to the door. I watched Vanessa buckle Leo into the back of her silver sedan. She waved as she backed out of the driveway. I stood on the porch until her taillights disappeared around the curve of the street. The moment she was gone, I locked the door. I threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the chain. The silence rushed back in, but now it felt violated. Her perfume, something expensive and floral, lingered in the hallway, masking the smell of the old house. I did not go back to the kitchen immediately. I went to the hall closet and retrieved the black padded case I had brought up from the basement earlier. I unzipped it and took out the RF detector. It was an older model, a wand-like device with a telescoping antenna and a row of LED lights that went from green to red. It was designed to find live electrical wires behind drywall, but it picked up any active radio frequency transmission. I extended the antenna. I turned the sensitivity dial to the halfway point. The device let out a low static hiss. Okay, I whispered. Let us see how paranoid I really am. I started in the hallway. The lights stayed green. I moved into the living room, sweeping the wand over the bookshelves, the television, the old armchair where I spent my evenings reading. When I swept the wand over the coffee table, the device screamed. The LEDs shot from green to bright red. The speaker emitted a high-pitched squeal that made me wince. My stomach dropped. I knelt down. The coffee table was a heavy, solid oak piece that Sarah and I had bought 30 years ago. I ran my hand along the underside of the wood. My fingers brushed against something cool and plastic. I pulled it loose. It was a small black rectangle, no bigger than a matchbox held in place by double-sided adhesive tape. It had a tiny microphone hole on one side and a battery compartment on the other. I stared at it, my hand shaking uncontrollably. This was where I sat when I called my friends. This was where I sat and talked to the picture of my wife on lonely nights. This was where I had wept openly after the funeral. She had heard it all. I did not destroy it. Not yet. I placed it gently on the carpet and stood up. The anger was rising hot and choking, but I forced it down. I had to know the extent of the infection. I moved to the kitchen. The wand shrieked again near the dining table. Another device identical to the first stuck under the lip of the table where I ate my breakfast. I checked the den. Nothing. I checked the guest room. Nothing. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. I approached my bedroom. This was the sanctuary. This was the one place that should have been sacred. I stood in the doorway and raised the wand. I swept it toward the bed. The device screamed instantly. I threw the wand onto the mattress and ripped the sheets back. Nothing. I checked under the frame. Nothing. I grabbed the bedside lamp, the one Sarah had chosen, and turned it over. There, nestled in the hollow base of the lamp, was the third bug. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the small black plastic device in my hand. I felt violated in a way that words could not express. It was not just an invasion of privacy. It was a rape of my life. For 2 years, Vanessa had been listening to me breathe while I slept. She had listened to me whisper goodnight to an empty pillow. She had cataloged my grief, my loneliness, and my vulnerability. Why? The answer came to me with cold logic: control. She needed to know if I was getting suspicious. She needed to know if I was spending Lucas's trust fund money. She needed to know if I was mentally deteriorating so she could build a case for guardianship. She was not just hiding Lucas. She was waiting for me to die or lose my mind so she could take everything. I looked at the bug in my hand. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to scream her name and curse her until the windows rattled. I wanted to drive to her office and tear her world apart with my bare hands. But I stopped. If I destroyed the bug, she would know. The signal would cut out. She would know that I knew. And if she knew that I knew, she would move Lucas. She would disappear. I would lose the only lead I had. I had to play the game. I had to be the building that looked sound on the outside while the demolition charges were being set in the basement. I put the bug back into the base of the lamp. I went downstairs and reattached the device under the dining table and the coffee table. I grabbed a notepad from the counter and a pen. My hand wrote furiously, the ink digging into the paper. "I know you are listening, you witch. I will find him." I stared at the words. They felt good. They felt righteous. Then I pulled out my lighter and set the corner of the paper on fire. I held it over the sink until the flames licked my fingertips, then dropped it and washed the ashes down the drain. I could not communicate with her. I had to perform for her. I cleared my throat. I looked at the ceiling, imagining the invisible waves carrying my voice to a server, somewhere perhaps even to headphones sitting on her desk. "Where are my keys?" I muttered, pitching my voice to sound frail, confused. "I just had them. What day is it? Is it Wednesday?" I shuffled around the kitchen, opening and closing drawers loudly. "Sarah," I called out, my voice trembling. "Sarah, did you move the checkbook?" I paused, letting the silence hang. Calling out to my dead wife was a low blow, even to myself, but it was exactly the kind of decline Vanessa was hoping for. It would confirm her narrative. Michael Williams is losing it. He is confused. He is no threat. "Stupid old fool," I muttered to myself. "Losing your mind, just like your father." I kept up the act for another 10 minutes, wandering from room to room, muttering nonsense, complaining about the rain, asking questions to people who were not there. Then I stopped. I needed to think. I needed to plan. And I could not do that in a house that had ears. There was only one room in the house that I had built myself from the studs up. The dark room. Photography had been my hobby before my eyes started to go. I had built a small dark room in the back of the pantry off the mudroom. Because it required total darkness, I had sealed it tight. And because I often played loud opera music while I developed film, I had soundproofed it with high-density acoustic foam and double-layered drywall. It was a dead zone. I shuffled loudly toward the mudroom. "Need to find that thing," I mumbled. "Where is the bleach?" I opened the pantry door, stepped inside and squeezed through the second door into the dark room. I closed it behind me. The heavy seal hissed as it locked into place. The silence here was different. It was true silence. Dead silence. I did not turn on the main light. I flipped the switch for the red safety light. The room bathed in a blood-colored glow. The smell of vinegar and old chemicals hung in the air. I slumped against the developing table, letting the mask fall. My face contorted with rage and grief. I let out a silent scream, my mouth opening wide, the cords in my neck straining, but no sound escaping the room. I pounded my fist against the rubber mat of the table once, twice, 3 times, until my knuckles throbbed. I was trapped in my own home. I was a prisoner in a panopticon built by my daughter-in-law, but prisoners have escaped before. I looked at the red-lit room. This would be my command center. This was the only place I could be Michael Williams, the inspector, the man who found the cracks. I pulled the map I had printed from the basement computer out of my pocket. I spread it out on the table. The red light made the contour lines look like veins. Snoqualmie, the foothills, a 40-mile radius. I had the location. I had the motivation. And now, I had the element of surprise disguised as senility. Vanessa thought she was watching a crumbling ruin. She did not know she was looking at a fortress preparing for war. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp scent of the fixer chemical. It cleared my head. "Okay, Vanessa," I whispered into the red darkness. "You want a show, I will give you a show. But you are not going to like the ending." I needed help. I could not do this alone, not with eyes on me 24/7. I needed someone who could move in the shadows. I needed someone who knew about secrets. I thought of Sarah's safety deposit box. The key was hidden in the greenhouse outside the range of the bugs. I needed to get to the bank. But first, I had to survive the night. I had to go back out there into the stage lights and play the role of my life. I checked my watch, my own watch, not Lucas's. It was 5:30. I composed my face. I hunched my shoulders. I opened the door and stepped back out into the kitchen. "Soup," I muttered loud enough for the microphone under the table to pick up. "I just want some soup." I opened the cupboard and reached for a can, my mind already calculating the load-bearing capacity of Vanessa's lies. She had built a skyscraper of deceit, but she had forgotten one thing: even the tallest towers fall if you undermine the foundation. And I was already digging. The rain had not stopped. If anything, it had intensified, turning the view from my kitchen window into a blurred watercolor of grays and greens. I stood by the sink, washing a bowl that was already clean, muttering to myself about the weather and my aching joints. I had to keep the performance up. The little black microphones taped under my furniture were listening, feeding my feigned decline to the woman who was holding my son hostage. But my mind was miles away, drifting back to a conversation I had with Sarah 3 months before she died. We had been sitting on the back porch. She was already sick then, her skin possessing that translucent, fragile quality that signals the end, though the doctors were still baffled by the rapidity of her decline. She had gripped my hand with surprising strength, her eyes clear and terrified. "Do not trust her, Michael," she had whispered. "Who?" I had asked, patting her hand, thinking it was the medication talking. "Vanessa," she hissed. Her smile, it never reaches her eyes. It is just a muscle contraction. She looks at us like we are variables in an equation she is trying to solve. I had dismissed it. I had told her she was tired. I had told her Vanessa was family. I was a structural inspector. I looked for cracks in concrete, not in people. I had been blind. "I need to check the orchids," I announced loudly to the empty kitchen. "If I do not water them, Sarah will be furious." I shuffled to the back door, grabbed my yellow slicker, and stepped out into the deluge. The greenhouse was a small, glass-enclosed structure at the edge of the property. It was Sarah's sanctuary. Since she passed, I had kept it alive, a humid, fragrant shrine to the woman I loved. I closed the glass door behind me, the sound of the rain instantly muffling into a dull drumbeat. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. There were no bugs here. I had swept the place yesterday with the RF detector. It was clean. I walked over to the back bench where a massive cymbidium orchid sat in a terracotta pot. It was Sarah's favorite. She had won a prize for it at the county fair 5 years ago. I dug my fingers into the loose, dark soil near the rim of the pot. The dirt was cool and wet. My fingertips brushed against something plastic. I pulled it out. It was a small Ziploc bag rolled tight and sealed with duct tape. Inside was a single silver key. I stared at it, a lump forming in my throat. Sarah had told me about this key in a fever dream near the end, but I had thought it was nonsense. The orchid, Michael. The roots hold the truth. I wiped the dirt off the key. It was stamped with a number 402 and the logo of Pacific Trust Bank. I pocketed the key, my hand trembling not from age, but from a sudden, overwhelming surge of grief and rage. She had known. My God, she had known, and I had not listened. I left the greenhouse, locking the door behind me. I went back into the house just long enough to grab my car keys and shout something about going to the pharmacy for my back pills. The drive to Pacific Trust was a blur of windshield wipers and brake lights. The bank was a fortress of gray stone downtown, a building I had inspected myself 20 years ago. It was solid, immovable. I walked into the lobby, the air conditioning hitting me with a sterile chill. I approached the teller, a young woman with kind eyes. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said, sliding the key across the marble counter, along with my ID. "Box 402. It is in my wife's name, Sarah Williams, but I am the co-signer." The clerk checked her computer. "One moment, Mr. Williams." She led me through the heavy steel gate down into the vault. The air here smelled of old paper and dust. She unlocked the box, pulled out the long metal drawer, and carried it to a private viewing room. "Take your time," she said, closing the door. I was alone. I lifted the lid. Inside there was no jewelry, no cash. Just a thick manila envelope and a leather-bound notebook. I opened the notebook first. It was Sarah's diary. The entries were dated from the last year of her life. February 10th. Vanessa brought over soup today. Tasted bitter. I felt dizzy an hour later. My stomach felt like it was on fire. March 3rd. She asked about the trust fund again. She wants to know if Michael has power of attorney. I told her nothing. April 15th. I hired a man. His name is Cole. I need to know where the money is coming from. Her car is new. Her clothes are designer, but Lucas says they are tight on cash. It does not add up. I read the words and the room spun. Sarah suspected she was being poisoned. The rapid decline, the doctors could not explain it, wasn't natural. It was murder. A slow, calculated murder committed by the woman who was currently making peanut butter sandwiches for my grandson. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to vomit, but I forced myself to keep reading. I opened the manila envelope. It contained a report from a private investigator named Cole regarding Vanguard Real Estate Solutions, Vanessa's company. The numbers were staggering. Debt $42 million. Assets liquidated. Status under investigation by the IRS for tax fraud and potential money laundering. Vanessa was not a successful developer. She was a fraud. She was drowning in debt, playing a shell game with investors' money. And the only thing keeping her afloat was the illusion of success. Then I found the document that tied it all together. A copy of Sarah's amended will. I remembered when she updated it. She had told me it was just housekeeping. I had not read the fine print. I trusted her. I read it now, and I understood the genius of my wife. Clause 7. In the event that my son, Lucas Williams, is declared deceased, the entirety of the Williams Family Trust shall be donated to the Seattle Children's Hospital. However, in the event that Lucas Williams is incapacitated or unable to manage his affairs, control of the trust shall revert solely to my husband, Michael Williams. Under no circumstances shall Vanessa Williams have access to the principal or act as trustee. I sat back in the hard wooden chair, the papers trembling in my hands. This was it. This was the motive. Vanessa needed money. Desperately. Lucas had a trust fund worth millions in inheritance from his grandmother that he could access when he turned 35, which was this year. But Sarah had blocked her. If she killed Lucas, the money went to charity. She would get nothing. If she declared him incompetent, the control went to me. She would get nothing. So she had to find a third option. She had to keep him alive but hidden. She had to make him travel for work. As long as he was legally competent, but unavailable, she could forge his signature. She could act as his proxy. She could drain the account slowly, claiming it was for investments or living expenses, while he was away saving the world in the Arctic. She was not just holding him hostage, she was milking him dry day by day, dollar by dollar. And she was keeping me subdued with the threat of my own senility, so I would never look closely enough to see the drain. The rage that filled me was cold and hard, like steel tempered in ice. She had killed my wife. I was sure of it now. And she was bleeding my son dry while keeping him in a cage. I looked at the time. I had been in the vault for 40 minutes. I needed to move. I pulled out my smartphone. I had a friend, Arthur, a lawyer who had retired 2 years ago, but still kept his license active. He was the only man I trusted to hold this grenade. I used a scanning app to capture every page of the diary, the PI report, and the will. I encrypted the file with a password ORCID and sent it to Arthur's private encrypted email server. I typed a quick message, Arthur. Read the attachment. Password is Sarah's favorite flower. Do not call me. Do not email me back. Just hold it. If anything happens to me, give this to the district attorney. I waited for the sent confirmation. Then, I deleted the app, the photos, and the message from my phone. I put the physical documents back in the box. They were safer here than in my house. I walked out of the vault, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I thanked the clerk with a nod that I hoped looked like the vacant gratitude of an old man. I walked out into the rain. The city was gray and weeping, mirroring the storm inside me. As I approached my truck, I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. The sense of being watched. It is a feeling you get on a job site when a load is about to shift, a subtle vibration in the air. I unlocked my truck and climbed in, but I did not start the engine immediately. I adjusted the rearview mirror. 3 cars back, parked in a loading zone, sat a gray sedan. It was nondescript. A Honda or a Toyota, the kind of car you see 1,000 times a day and never remember. The windows were tinted dark. I started my engine and pulled out into traffic. The gray sedan pulled out 3 seconds later. I turned right. It turned right. I circled the block. It circled the block. I was being followed. It was not paranoia. It was not a symptom of grief. It was a surveillance tale. Vanessa was not just relying on the bugs in my house. She had eyes on me in the street. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She was scared. She knew the delivery driver had made contact. She was tightening the noose. But she did not know about the box in the bank. She did not know about the key in the orchid pot. And she certainly did not know that the old structural inspector she thought was losing his mind had just figured out the blueprints of her entire operation. I glanced at the gray car in the mirror again. "Follow me all you want," I whispered. "I am going to lead you straight to hell." I merged onto the highway, heading away from home, away from the bugs, and toward the one place where I could build an army to fight back. I needed a team. I needed professionals. And thanks to Sarah's files, I knew exactly how dangerous the enemy was. I was not just fighting a greedy daughter-in-law. I was fighting a murderer with $40 million of debt and nothing left to lose. The gray sedan was tenacious. I had to give them that. They kept a steady distance, 2 cars back, mirroring my every lane change. But they were driving with the cautious aggression of hired muscle, not the local knowledge of a man who had inspected every inch of this city's infrastructure for 4 decades. I took the exit for the industrial district. The roads here were narrower, the pavement slick with oil, and rain hemmed in by looming warehouses and shipping containers. I watched the gray sedan follow its headlights, cutting through the gloom. I knew this area. I knew the rhythm of the traffic lights, the shortcuts the trucks used, and the alleyways that looked like dead ends but were not. I accelerated toward a sharp right turn onto Harbor Avenue. The sedan sped up to close the gap. "Come on," I muttered, gripping the wheel. "Take the bait." As I rounded the corner, I saw what I was looking for, a narrow service alley between 2 abandoned fish processing plants. It was barely wide enough for my truck. I slammed on the brakes, cranked the wheel hard to the left, and shot into the gap. My side mirrors scraped against the brick walls with a shriek of metal on stone, but I pushed through. I emerged onto a parallel street, cut across 2 lanes of traffic, earning a furious honk from a semi-truck, and ducked into the underground parking garage of the old shipyard office. I killed the lights and the engine. I waited. 30 seconds later, the gray sedan tore past the garage entrance, speeding down the main road, its brake lights flashing, as the driver realized he had lost me. I let out a breath, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was 64 years old, not a stunt driver, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. I waited another 5 minutes, just to be sure, then exited the garage through the rear maintenance ramp. I was free, for now. I drove to a nondescript office building in the shadow of the Smith Tower. The sign on the frosted glass door on the 3rd floor read simply, "Blackwood Investigations." Frank Blackwood was a man carved from granite. He was a former detective with the Seattle PD's Economic Crimes Unit, forced into early retirement after he refused to look the other way on a corruption case involving the mayor's office. I had met him 10 years ago when I testified as an expert witness in an insurance fraud trial he was investigating. We respected each other's refusal to bend the truth. I found him sitting behind a desk cluttered with files and empty coffee cups. The room smelled of stale tobacco and rain. Frank looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in my wet clothes and the grim set of my jaw. "Michael," he rumbled, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "You look like you just crawled out of a storm drain. What brings a retired inspector to my humble abode?" "I need help, Frank," I said, locking the door behind me. "And I need it off the books." I sat down and laid it all out. I told him about the package, the GPS, coordinates, the bugs in my house, and the documents in Sarah's safety deposit box. I showed him the printout of the coordinates and the receipt from the pharmacy. Frank listened in silence, his face unreadable. He tapped a pen against his desk, a steady, rhythmic sound. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "That is a hell of a story, Michael," he said slowly. "Kidnapping, fraud, murder. You are accusing a prominent businesswoman of running a criminal empire from her kitchen table." "I am not accusing her of running an empire," I corrected. "I am accusing her of drowning and dragging my family down with her. Look at the data, Frank." He picked up the GPS log again. He studied the coordinates, then pulled up a map on his computer. He typed in the numbers. A satellite image appeared on the screen. It showed a sprawling compound nestled deep in the Cascade foothills, surrounded by dense forest. The main building was a modern fortress of glass and steel perched on a cliff edge. "I know this place," Frank said, his voice dropping an octave. "Skyline Recovery Institute." "Recovery?" I asked. "Like a rehab. On paper," Frank said. "In reality, it is a high-end storage facility for inconvenient relatives. Wealthy families send their problem members there. Addicts, the mentally unstable, or just the ones who refuse to sign over their trust funds. They charge $30,000 a month for holistic therapy, which mostly consists of heavy sedation and isolation." "My son is in there," I said, pointing at the screen. "That is where the tracker was for 6 months. If he is at Skyline, getting him out is not going to be like picking him up from school," Frank warned. "That place is a fortress. They have private security, ex-military. They do not answer to the local sheriff. The owner, Dr. Eris Thorne, has friends in very high places. Judges, senators. People who owe him favors for keeping their secrets locked away." "I do not care who they are," I said, leaning forward. "I want my son back," Frank sighed, rubbing his temples. "We need proof, Michael. Hard proof. A GPS log is not enough to get a warrant, especially not against people with this kind of legal firepower. If we go in there half-cocked, they will bury us. They will claim Lucas is there voluntarily for treatment, and you are the crazy old man harassing him. Hell, with Vanessa's groundwork, they probably already have the paperwork to prove you are senile. So, what do we do?" "We need eyes inside," Frank said. "I need to know his condition. I need a picture of him, ideally holding a newspaper with today's date, looking like he wants to leave. Or a statement. Can you get someone in?" "I can try to slip an operative in as a member of the cleaning staff, but their vetting process takes weeks." "We do not have weeks." I looked at the satellite image again. The shape of the building triggered a memory. The cantilevered deck. The reinforced retaining wall on the north slope. "Wait," I said. "Zoom in on the north side, the foundation." Frank clicked the mouse. The image enlarged. "I know this building," I whispered. "I inspected the foundation pour 15 years ago. It was a private lodge before it was a clinic. The ground there is unstable, lots of shale. They had to build a massive drainage system to keep the basement from flooding during the spring thaw. So, I grabbed a piece of paper and began to sketch. My hand moved with the practiced ease of 40 years. "There is a storm drain here at the base of the cliff. It connects to a service tunnel that runs under the main structure and comes out in the mechanical room near the laundry facilities. It was supposed to be welded shut after construction, but the contractor was cheap. He used a simple grate." Frank looked at my sketch, then back at me. A slow grin spread across his face. You are telling me we can walk right into the basement. Crawl, I corrected. It is a 3-foot pipe. But yes, if the grate is still rusted, we can get in. Okay, Frank said, standing up. That is a plan. I will get my gear. Night vision cameras, silent drills. We go in tonight. If Lucas is there, we get the proof and then we call the FBI. We bypass the local cops entirely. I am coming with you, I said. Frank shook his head. No. You are the client. You are 64. You stay in the van. I know the layout, Frank, I insisted. I know where the load-bearing walls are. I know where the conduits run. If we get trapped, I am the only one who can find a way out that is not on the blueprints. Besides, I added, my voice hardening, he is my son. Frank looked at me for a long moment. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded. Fine. But you do exactly what I say. No heroics. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. I had bought a burner phone on the way here, ditching my tracked smartphone in a trash can 3 blocks away. Only one person had this number, Arthur, the lawyer I had emailed earlier. But when I looked at the screen, it was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. There was no text, just an image. My blood turned to ice. It was a photo of Leo, my 7-year-old grandson. He was on the playground at his school. The photo was taken from a distance through a chain-link fence, likely with a telephoto lens. The crosshairs of a digital scope were superimposed over his laughing face. Below the image, a single line of text appeared. Bad dogs get their puppies taken away. Go home. Michael, last warning. My hand shook so violently, I almost dropped the phone. Michael, Frank asked, seeing my face. What is it? I turned the screen toward him. Frank swore softly. They are tracking you, even with the burner, or they anticipated you would run. They are threatening Leo, I choked out. Vanessa. She would hurt her own son. She is desperate, Frank said, his voice grim. People like her narcissists. Children are just assets to them, leverage. I have to go back, I said, standing up. I have to get him. If you go back now, they win, Frank said, grabbing my arm. They will lock you up in a facility right next to Lucas, or worse, and Leo will be left with her forever. So what do? I shouted. Let them kill him, no, Frank said firmly. We accelerate. We get the proof tonight. Once we expose her, the police will pick her up. Child Protective Services will take Leo. He is safe as long as she thinks she has you under control. She is using him to herd you back to the pen. He was right. I knew he was right. But every instinct in my body screamed at me to run to the school. Call the school, Frank commanded. Use a fake voice. Say there is a family emergency, and his uncle is picking him up. I will send one of my guys, a big guy, ex-Navy SEAL, to go get him and take him to a safe house. He will not let anyone near that kid. I nodded, my breath coming in short gasps. Okay, do it. Frank made the call. Within minutes, he had a team in motion. A protection detail for Leo. A surveillance van for us. We are going to Skyline, Frank said, loading a magazine into a handgun. And we are going to burn her kingdom to the ground. I looked at the sketch of the drainage tunnel. It was a narrow, dark, suffocating passage into the heart of the enemy's fortress. Let's go, I said. I was not just an inspector anymore. I was a father, a grandfather, and a man with absolutely nothing left to lose. The structure was coming down tonight. We were supposed to raid the Skyline Institute at midnight. That was the plan Frank and I had agreed upon in the smoke-stained office of Blackwood Investigations. We had the gear, the personnel, and the blueprints. We had the element of surprise. But I had underestimated Vanessa. I had treated her like a greedy amateur, forgetting that a shark does not need to be a strategist to kill you. It just needs to smell blood in the water. And I had been bleeding for a long time. The counterattack did not come in the form of hired goons or a black SUV. It came with a polite knock on my door at 11 in the morning on Thursday. I opened it, to find a process server, a bored-looking young man chewing gum. He shoved a thick envelope into my chest, mumbled a legal disclaimer, and walked away before I could even speak. I tore the envelope open in the hallway. The header at the top of the first page stopped my heart colder than any Arctic Wind Emergency ex parte petition for temporary guardianship. Petitioner, Vanessa Williams. Respondent, Michael Williams. Allegation: advanced dementia, paranoid delusions, risk of self-harm. I leaned against the wall, my knees suddenly feeling like water. I read the document, my eyes scanning the legal jargon that was designed to strip a human being of their autonomy. She was not just claiming I was old, she was claiming I was dangerous. Exhibit A was a digital file transcript. I read the lines, and a sick feeling of vertigo washed over me. Respondent: they are listening. The walls have ears. I have to burn the messages. Respondent: where is Sarah? Why did you move the checkbook? Who is stealing my money? I stared at the paper. These were my words. This was the performance I had put on in the kitchen just yesterday, the senile old man act I had performed to throw off the bugs. But Vanessa had taken the raw audio and butchered it. She had cut out the pauses, rearranged the sentences, and stripped away the context. She had turned my strategic deception into a confession of insanity. Exhibit B was a sworn affidavit from Dr. Lawrence Sterling. He was my general practitioner, a man I had known for 20 years. A man who had always joked about my high cholesterol. I have observed a rapid cognitive decline in Mr. Williams over the past 6 months, the affidavit read. He has exhibited violent outbursts, confusion regarding time and place, and a detachment from reality. It is my professional medical opinion that he requires immediate, 24-hour supervision for his own safety. She had bought him. It was the only explanation. Or perhaps she had threatened him with the same ruin she was visiting upon me. I ran to the kitchen phone, the landline, and dialed the bank. I needed to access my savings to pay Frank. I am sorry, Mr. Williams, the automated voice said. This account has been frozen by court order, number 7742. I slammed the receiver down. I tried my credit cards online, declined. 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 She had cut the financial arteries. I was broke. Then the final blow. I turned the page to the restraining order. The respondent is hereby prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Leo Williams or the petitioner. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. She had taken my money. She had taken my reputation. And now she had taken my grandson. I scrambled for my burner phone, the one Frank had given me. I dialed Arthur, my lawyer friend who was holding the evidence from Sarah's safety deposit box. He was the only one who could file an injunction, who could stop this legal steamroller before it crushed me flat. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, a voice answered. But it was not Arthur. It was a woman, her voice thick with tears. Hello. Brenda, I asked. It was Arthur's wife. This is Michael. Is Arthur there? Oh, Michael, she sobbed. You did not hear it happen 2 hours ago. My stomach dropped. What happened? A truck, she cried. A delivery truck ran a red light downtown. It T-boned Arthur's car on the driver's side. He is in surgery now. They say the brain swelling is severe. They do not know if he will wake up. I lowered the phone slowly, Brenda's sobbing still tinny in the earpiece. A truck. A red light. Just like the delivery driver outside the diner had almost been hit. Just like the reporter Frank mentioned. This was not an accident. Vanessa was cleaning house. She knew Arthur had the documents. She had taken him off the board. I was alone. I had no lawyer, no money, and the police were coming. I saw them through the front window 10 minutes later. A cruiser pulled up to the curb, but the lights were not flashing. 2 officers stepped out. I recognized one of them, Officer Miller. He was a regular at the local bar where Vanessa's real estate company held their holiday parties. I had seen them drinking together. They were walking up the path. Panic raw and animalistic clawed at my throat. If they took me now, they would not take me to jail. They would take me to a psychiatric hold. And from there, Vanessa would have me transferred to Skyline. I would be put in a room next to Lucas, drugged into oblivion, and we would both rot there until we died. I looked around the living room. I needed a weapon. No, a weapon would get me shot. I needed an exit. But the back door was too far and they would see me running across the yard. I needed to change the venue. I needed to get out of this house, but I could not do it in handcuffs. The doorbell rang. "Mr. Williams, it is Officer Miller. We just want to check on you." The lie hung heavy in the air. I looked at the structural beams of my house. I looked at the floor. And then an idea formed. It was desperate, it was dangerous, and it required me to trust a system that was currently trying to devour me. I unlocked the door and opened it. Officer Miller stood there, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Mr. Williams, we have a court order here to transport you for a medical evaluation. Your daughter-in-law is very worried about you." "She is lying," I said, my voice trembling. This time I did not have to act much. The fear was real. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Michael," Miller said, stepping into the foyer without an invitation. "Dr. Sterling says you are a danger to yourself." "I am fine," I said, backing away. "I just need to call my lawyer." "Your lawyer cannot help you right now," Miller said, a smirk touching his lips. He knew. "Come on. Let us go to the car." I took a step back, grabbed my chest, and let out a strangled gasp. "My heart," I wheezed. Miller rolled his eyes. "Cut the crap, Michael." I crumpled to the floor. I did not do it gently. I let gravity take me, slamming my shoulder hard against the hardwood to sell the impact. I convulsed once, clutching my left arm, and then let my breathing turn shallow and ragged. "I cannot breathe," I choked out. "Chest pain." The second officer, a rookie I did not recognize, looked panicked. "Miller, he is turning pale. Is he faking?" "He is faking," Miller spat. He kicked my shoe. "Get up." I squeezed my eyes shut and let out a low, guttural moan, focusing on the image of Lucas in a cage to summon the sweat on my brow. "Help me." "Miller, if he dies in custody, it is on us," the rookie said, his voice rising. "We have to call EMS. It is protocol." Miller swore loudly. "Fine. Call the meat wagon. But he goes to county under guard." I lay on the floor, listening to the rookie call dispatch. I kept my eyes closed, controlling my breathing, making it shallow and irregular. 20 minutes later, I was strapped to a gurney, an oxygen mask over my face, being loaded into the back of an ambulance. Officer Miller climbed in the back with me, looking furious. "You are not slick, old man," he whispered as the sirens wailed. "As soon as the doctor clears you, I am driving you straight to Skyline myself." But he had made a mistake. He was taking me to Harborview Medical Center, the county hospital. It was a public facility. It was chaotic, understaffed, and massive. And I had inspected the seismic retrofits there 5 years ago. I knew the building better than the doctors who worked in it. The emergency room was a war zone. Gurneys lined the hallways, nurses ran back and forth, and the PA system blared constant codes. They wheeled me into a curtained bay in the triage unit. A nurse hooked me up to a monitor. "BP is elevated," she said. "Heart rate is tachycardic." Of course it was. I was terrified. "Keep an eye on him," Miller told the nurse. "He is a flight risk and a psych hold." "I am busy keeping him alive, officer," the nurse snapped. "Stand outside if you are not medical personnel." Miller scowled and stepped just outside the curtain, crossing his arms. I waited. I watched the monitor. I watched the nurse distractedly typing notes into a computer. "I need to use the bathroom," I rasped, pulling the mask down. "Use the bedpan, honey," she said without looking up. "Please," I begged. "I have dignity." She sighed, looking at my age, my gray hair, and the pitiful look on my face. She glanced at the monitor. My rhythm was sinus tachycardia, but stable. "Fine. "There is a restroom right there." She pointed to a door within the triage bay. "Do not lock it." I nodded weakly. I slid off the bed, my legs wobbling. I shuffled toward the bathroom door, clutching my hospital gown. Miller watched me through the gap in the curtain. "Be quick, Michael." I went into the bathroom and closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, I straightened up. The frailty vanished. I did not use the toilet. I climbed onto it. I looked up at the ceiling tiles. This was an older section of the hospital. The drop ceiling hid the HVAC ducts and the service crawl space. But more importantly, I knew that behind the access panel on the far wall, the one labeled "Do Not Obstruct," was a vertical pipe chase that ran down to the laundry loading dock. It was tight. It was dangerous. But it was a way out. I grabbed the handle of the access panel. It was locked. I reached into the pocket of my trousers, which I had insisted on keeping under the gown. I pulled out a small flat piece of metal, a shim I always kept in my wallet for testing door gaps. I worked the lock. It was a simple wafer lock, cheap and old. 30 seconds of jiggling and it clicked. I opened the panel. A blast of stale, dusty air hit me. I looked down. It was a drop of 2 floors, but there were ladder rungs welded to the side of the chase for maintenance. I heard a knock on the bathroom door. "You okay in there, Mr. Williams?" the nurse called. "Just a minute," I groaned, flushing the toilet for sound cover. I squeezed through the opening. It was a tight fit. My shoulders scraped against the concrete. I found the first rung with my foot and lowered myself into the darkness. I pulled the panel shut behind me, just as I heard the bathroom door handle jiggle. I descended fast, sliding more than climbing the rust from the rungs, coating my hands. I hit the bottom, a concrete floor covered in lint and dust. I was in the sub-basement. I navigated the maze of pipes following the rumble of the industrial washers. I found the loading dock doors. They were open, a delivery truck backing in with fresh linens. I slipped out behind a stack of pallets, stripping off the hospital gown to reveal my flannel shirt and trousers underneath. I walked out into the rain, just another old man in the city, invisible to the chaos I had left upstairs. I walked 3 blocks before I dared to stop. I ducked into a bus shelter and pulled out the burner phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely press the buttons. I dialed Frank. "Michael," his voice was tense. "Where are you? I heard about the arrest." "I am out," I said, my voice hoarse. "I am at the corner of James and Boren. I need an extraction." "You escaped custody," Frank sounded impressed. "You really are full of surprises. Frank Arthur is down. They froze my money. They have a restraining order. I have nothing left." "You have this," Frank said. "Check your messages." I pulled the phone away from my ear. A new picture message had come in. I opened it. The image was grainy, taken in low light through what looked like a telephoto lens pushing through a dirty window. It showed a small, sterile room. Sitting on a bed, his head in his hands, was a man. He looked gaunt. His hair was long and matted. He was wearing gray scrubs. But when I zoomed in, I saw the face. It was Lucas. He was alive. He looked broken, he looked starved, but he was alive. And on the bedside table next to him, clearly visible, was a newspaper, the Seattle Times. The headline was blurry, but the layout was from today. "I got it an hour ago," Frank said in my ear. "My guy got onto the ridge behind the facility. It is confirmation, Michael. Proof of life. And proof of kidnapping." I stared at the screen, tears mixing with the rain on my face. "He looks so weak, Frank," I whispered. "He is alive," Frank said firmly. "And tonight we are going to get him out. I do not care about the court order. I do not care about the police. We have the moral high ground, and we have the firepower." "Come get me," I said. "I am ready. Sit tight. 5 minutes. Look for a blue van." I pocketed the phone and leaned against the cold glass of the bus shelter. I was a fugitive. I was a pauper. I was technically insane in the eyes of the law, but I was coming for my son, and God help anyone who stood in my way. The storm that night was not just weather. It felt like a physical manifestation of the chaos consuming my life. The rain fell in sheets so heavy, they bruised the skin, driven by a wind that screamed through the Douglas firs surrounding the Skyline Institute. We parked the blue surveillance van 2 miles down the logging road, hidden beneath a canopy of dripping hemlock branches. Frank Blackwood checked his weapon one last time. The metallic click of the magazine sliding home was the only sound in the cab other than the drumming rain. He looked at me, his face illuminated by the faint green glow of the dashboard clock. It was just past 1 in the morning. "You stick to my back," Frank said, his voice low and tight. "You do not engage. You point out the wires, you open the doors, and you keep your head down. If things go south, you run. You do not look back. You run." "I am not leaving without my son," I said. Frank did not argue. He just handed me a heavy flashlight and a radio earpiece. "Let us go." We moved through the woods like ghosts, the mud sucking at our boots with every step. I led the way. Even after 15 years, the topography of this site was etched into my brain. I remembered the slope gradients, the soil composition, and most importantly, the drainage outflow. We scrambled down a steep ravine, the wet shale sliding dangerously under our feet. At the bottom, half buried in overgrown blackberry bushes and decades of silt, was the rusted iron grate I had told Frank about. It looked impenetrable to the naked eye, a relic of a forgotten construction phase. But I knew the welds were weak. I had flagged them on the initial inspection report, a report the developers had ignored to save $3,000. Frank produced a battery-powered hydraulic spreader. He wedged the jaws between the rusted bars and hit the trigger. The machine whined a high-pitched mechanical mosquito, and the iron groaned in protest. With a sharp snap that sounded like a gunshot, the rusted bolt sheared off. Frank pulled the grate back just enough for a man to squeeze through. The smell hit us instantly, damp earth mold, and the stagnant metallic tang of old water. "After you, Mr. Inspector," Frank whispered. I crawled in first. The concrete pipe was 3 feet wide, forcing us to move on our hands and knees. It was claustrophobic, a concrete throat threatening to swallow us whole. My knees screamed in protest, grinding against the rough surface, but the image of Lucas's gaunt face from the photo kept me moving. We crawled for what felt like an eternity, counting the seams in the pipe to track our distance. 100 feet. 200. Above us, the facility slept. Or so I hoped. We reached the junction I had drawn on the napkin. The service ladder was rusted, but intact. I climbed up, pushing open the heavy steel maintenance hatch. It opened into the sub-basement, the mechanical heart of the building. The noise was the first thing I noticed. The hum of massive HVAC units, the rhythmic chugging of the boiler pumps. It was loud enough to cover our footsteps. We were inside. Frank moved with the lethal grace of a predator, sweeping the room with his weapon. I moved with the eyes of an engineer. I scanned the walls, not for threats, but for conduits. "The alarm panel is by the service elevator," I whispered, pointing to a gray metal box mounted near the heavy steel doors. "If we open that door without bypassing the circuit, it will trigger a silent alarm at the guard station." Frank nodded. "Work your magic." I approached the panel. It was a standard commercial security loop, but tampering with it required a steady hand. I pulled out my insulated screwdriver and my multimeter. My hands, which had shaken so violently in the hospital, were now rock steady. This was my world. Circuits, logic, physics. I located the tamper switch, a small magnetic read sensor. I used a strong magnet from my toolkit to trick the sensor into thinking the box was still closed, then unscrewed the faceplate. I bridged the alarm circuit with a jumper wire, bypassing the door contact entirely. "Green light," I whispered. Frank hit the call button. The elevator arrived instantly empty. We rode it up to the 3rd floor, the high-security recovery wing, according to the blueprints Frank had acquired. The doors slid open, and the atmosphere changed instantly. The basement had been industrial and gritty. This floor was sterile, silent, and terrifyingly expensive. The carpet was plush, absorbing sound. The walls were decorated with calming, abstract art. It smelled of lavender and antiseptic. We moved down the hallway checking the room numbers. 302, 303, 304. Frank stopped. He peered through the small observation window in the door. He stiffened, then stepped back and motioned for me to look. I looked inside. The room was furnished like a five-star hotel suite. Mahogany furniture, a leather armchair, a large flat-screen television playing a nature documentary on mute. But the illusion shattered when you looked at the window. It was not glass. It was polycarbonate laminate, thick enough to stop a bullet bolted into a reinforced steel frame. And the door had no handle on the inside. On the bed lay a figure that barely resembled the son I had raised. Lucas was pale, his skin possessing the translucent waxen quality of the dead. He was hooked up to an IV drip. His arms, usually toned from hours of drafting and site visits, were thin and wasted. He was staring at the ceiling, his eyes open but unseeing. "Lucas," I breathed the word, fogging the glass. The door was locked with a magnetic keycard system. Frank pulled out a digital decoder, a small black box with a ribbon cable. He slid the cable into the card reader. The device cycled through codes, the numbers flashing red on its small screen. Click. The light turned green. Frank pushed the door open, and we slipped inside. I rushed to the bedside. "Lucas, Lucas, can you hear me?" I grabbed his hand. It was ice cold. His fingers were limp. He did not react. His pupils were dilated, sluggish. "He is sedated," Frank said, checking the bag on the IV stand. "Midazolam and haloperidol. Chemical restraint. They are keeping him in a twilight state." "Wake him up," I demanded, shaking Lucas's shoulder gently. "Lucas, it is Dad. I am here." Lucas blinked. A slow, agonizing movement. His head rolled to the side and his eyes tried to focus on my face. A frown creased his forehead. He looked like a man trying to solve a complex equation through a thick fog. "Dad?" His voice was a dry, rasping whisper. It sounded like sandpaper on stone. Am I dreaming again?" "No, son, you are not dreaming," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I am real. I found you." Clarity, sharp and sudden, pierced through the drugs. His eyes widened. He gripped my hand, his strength feeble but desperate. "You have to go," he wheezed. "Vanessa, she has cameras. She watches everything." "I know," I said. "We are getting you out." "No," Lucas tried to sit up but collapsed back onto the pillows. "I cannot walk. My legs, they do not work. I have not walked in months." I looked at his legs under the sheet. Muscle atrophy. If we tried to carry him, we would be slow. Too slow. "Why is she doing this, Lucas?" Frank asked, stepping into the boy's line of sight. "We need to know." Lucas looked at Frank, then back at me. "The patents," he gasped. "The Vanguard project. It was not just a building. It was a new geothermal energy conduction system. I invented it. It is worth billions. Vanessa. She made a deal with a private equity firm. They wanted the tech, but I refused to sell. I wanted it to be open source, to help people." He coughed, a dry hacking sound that rattled in his chest. "She forged my signature on the transfer deeds." Lucas continued, tears leaking from his eyes. "But she needs the land. The ranch. Mom's land. The geological survey shows the main vein runs right under your property, Dad. That is why she needs you incompetent. If you control the trust, you control the land. If she controls you, she sells the ranch and the patent." It all slotted into place. The final piece of the structural puzzle. It was never just about the money in the bank. It was about the land I had lived on for 40 years. She was going to sell my home, my wife's legacy, and my son's genius to the highest bidder. "We have to go," Frank said, checking the hallway. "Patrol is coming around in 2 minutes." "Take him," I said, grabbing Lucas's shoulders. Frank, grab his legs. "We cannot," Frank said, his voice hard. "Look at him, Michael. If we disconnect that IV, he could go into shock. We have to carry him through a drainage pipe. He will die before we get to the van." I am not leaving him, I shouted, forgetting to whisper. Dad, Lucas squeezed my hand. Get the proof. Get the red binder. In the nurse's station. It has the real charts. The logs of what they give me. And record this. Record me. Frank pulled out his phone. Talk, he commanded Lucas. State your name, the date, and what is happening to you. Lucas looked into the lens. He summoned every ounce of strength he had left. His voice grew stronger, fueled by rage. My name is Lucas Williams. Today is October 24th. I am being held against my will at Skyline Institute by my wife, Vanessa Williams, and Dr. Eris Thorne. I am not insane. I have been drugged and tortured to force the sale of my intellectual property. If you are seeing this, please help me. Got it, Frank said, cutting the recording. That is the nail in her coffin. The binder, Lucas whispered, his eyes drooping again. The adrenaline was fading. Nurse station, red binder. I will come back for you, son, I promised, kissing his forehead. I swear on your mother's grave I will come back with the entire U.S. Marshal Service. Go, Lucas breathed. Run. We slipped out of the room. The hallway was still empty. We moved toward the nurse's station, a circular desk in the center of the wing. It was unmanned. The night nurse was likely on a break or doing rounds on the other side. I saw it. A thick red binder sitting on the counter labeled Patient Logs, Restricted. I vaulted over the counter, my adrenaline masking the pain in my 64-year-old hips, and grabbed it. I flipped it open. It was all there. Dosage logs signed by Dr. Sterling. Emails from Vanessa giving instructions on behavioral correction. Got it, I hissed. Then the elevator chimed. We froze. The doors opened and two men stepped out. They were not doctors. They wore tactical black uniforms and carried batons, private security. They saw us instantly. Hey, one of them shouted. Freeze! Run! Frank roared. He did not wait for them to draw their tasers. He grabbed a heavy metal chair from the waiting area and hurled it down the hallway. It crashed into the guards, buying us a split second. We bolted toward the stairwell. I clutched the red binder to my chest like a shield. My lungs burned. My legs felt like lead. I heard heavy boots pounding on the carpet behind us. Code Gray intruders on level 3. A voice boomed over the intercom. Seal the exits. We hit the stairwell door. Frank kicked it open and we practically fell down the first flight of stairs. Faster, Michael, Frank yelled. We reached the ground floor, but the exit door was already buzzing with a red light. Magnetic locks engaged. We were trapped. The basement, I gasped. The tunnel. We scrambled down the final flight of stairs into the sub-basement. The noise of the machinery was deafening now. We sprinted past the boilers, heading for the maintenance hatch. But as we rounded the corner, we saw him. A third guard, this one huge, standing directly in front of the hatch. He held a stun baton that crackled with blue electricity. Frank didn't hesitate. He tackled the man. They hit the concrete floor with a sickening thud. The guard was younger and stronger, but Frank fought dirty. He jammed his thumb into the guard's eye and slammed his elbow into the man's throat. Go, Michael! Frank shouted, struggling to keep the guard in a chokehold. Get in the tunnel! I am not leaving you, I screamed, looking around for a weapon. You have the evidence, Frank yelled, his face turning red as the guard landed a punch to his ribs. If they catch you, it is all for nothing. Lucas dies. Get out. He was right. I was the payload. The binder and the phone were the only things that could save my son. I scrambled up the ladder and squeezed into the dark mouth of the pipe. Behind me, the stairwell door burst open. More footsteps, shouting. I looked back one last time. Frank had released the unconscious guard and was standing up, blocking the path to the tunnel. He pulled his handgun. He looked at me, his face bruised and bloody. Go be a father, Michael, he said. He turned to face the incoming security team. I scrambled backward into the darkness of the pipe, dragging the binder with me. I heard Frank shout, Back off! Then the deafening boom of a gunshot echoed through the pipe, magnified by the concrete walls. I flinched, slamming my head against the ceiling of the tunnel. My ears rang. I waited for a second shot, or a scream. Silence followed. I did not know if Frank was dead. I did not know if he had shot someone. All I knew was that I was alone in the dark, crawling through the muck, carrying the weight of 3 lives in my arms. I crawled. I crawled until my hands bled. I crawled until I saw the faint, gray light of the stormy night filtering through the broken grate. I tumbled out into the ravine, gasping for air, the rain washing the sweat and grime from my face. I clutched the red binder so tight, my fingers cramped. I had the truth, but the cost had been terrible. I scrambled up the ravine toward the van, slipping in the mud, sobbing with every breath. I started the engine, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As I peeled away onto the logging road, I looked in the rearview mirror. Lights were flaring on at the Skyline Institute. The fortress was waking up. I drove into the night, the gunshot still echoing in my mind, praying that Frank Blackwood had not just died for an old man's sins. The warehouse smelled of rust diesel and the briny rot of the Puget Sound. It was an abandoned structure on Pier 36, a relic from the days when I was just a junior inspector checking crane loads. I huddled in the foreman's office, a glass box suspended above the empty concrete floor, watching the rain lash against the cracked skylights. It was 3 a.m. I was shivering, wet and exhausted, but my mind had never been clearer. On the dusty desk in front of me lay the red binder, Frank's burner phone, and the weight of a decision that would either save my family or destroy us completely. I could not run. If I ran, I became the fugitive they claimed I was. If I disappeared, Vanessa won. She would keep Lucas in that hellhole, sell the ranch, and raise Leo to be just like her. I had to stand and fight, and the battlefield would be the very courtroom where she intended to bury me. I picked up the burner phone. My hand hovered over the keypad. I needed an ally, not a mercenary like Frank, but a legal weapon. Someone who hated Vanessa as much as I did. I remembered a name from the news a year ago, Elena Rostova. She was a young, tenacious assistant district attorney who had tried to nail Vanessa's company for zoning violations and bribery. She had failed because key witnesses developed sudden amnesia and evidence vanished. The press had crucified her, calling her a crusader without a cause. I found her number in Frank's contact list. He kept tabs on everyone. I dialed. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy but alert. "Who is this?" "This is Michael Williams," I said. "Do not hang up." There was a pause. The Michael Williams who is currently the subject of a citywide manhunt, the one who escaped police custody. "The Michael Williams who has the evidence you wished you had a year ago," I countered. "I have proof of guardianship fraud, kidnapping, money, laundering, and attempted murder. And I have it all in a red binder sitting right in front of me." Silence stretched on the line. I could hear her shifting, sitting up in bed. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you are the only one who knows what she is capable of, and because I think you are hungry for a rematch." "Meet me," she said. "My office, now." "No," I said. "Too risky. I am sending you a digital packet. Video testimony from my son, financial records from my late wife, and the medical logs from Skyline. Check your encrypted email in 5 minutes." I used the phone's camera to photograph every page of the red binder. I uploaded the video Frank had taken of Lucas. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "My God," Elena whispered. Her voice was trembling, but not with fear, with fury. This is everything. The billing codes, the forged signatures. Michael, this is a RICO case wrapped in a bow. We can take down the whole network. The doctors, the lawyers, the institute." "I need you to get a warrant for Skyline," I said. "Right now." "I can try," she said, the sound of keys clacking furiously in the background. "But Judge Miller is on the rotation tonight. He is a golf buddy of Dr. Thorne. He will stall. I need to get to Judge Holloway, but she does not sit until 8. We do not have until 8, I said. Just then, another call beeped in. Unknown number. Hold on, Elena, I said. I switched lines. Frank. I am alive. Frank's voice was weak, strained. Took a bullet to the shoulder. Nothing major. I am patching it up. Thank God, I breathed, slumping against the desk. Where are you? Safe house. But listen, Michael. We triggered the hornet's nest. My source at Skyline just texted. They are moving him. What? They are moving Lucas, tonight. A medical transport van is prepping at the loading dock. They are going to take him to a private airfield and fly him out of state. Probably to a black site facility in Nevada, where we will never find him. Within the hour, Frank said. You have to stop them. I cannot get there in time, I said, panic rising. And even if I could, I cannot take on a security team alone. You do not have to take them on, Frank said. You just have to freeze them. If the police raid the place, they cannot move him. But you need a distraction. Something big enough to force the police to act immediately, regardless of the warrant. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the morning. The hearing for my competency was scheduled for 9. I have an idea, I said. Frank, get patched up. Elena, are you still there? I merged the calls. I am here, Elena said. I heard that. Moving the victim creates exigent circumstances. I can bypass the warrant requirement if I have probable cause of immediate danger. I will give you the probable cause, I said. But I need you to be ready. Have the SWAT team spun up and waiting 2 miles from Skyline. Do not move until I give the signal. What signal? Elena asked. You will know it when you see it, I said. Just be ready to storm that castle. I hung up. The plan was insane. It relied on timing theatricality and the arrogance of my enemy. But it was the only card I had left. I spent the next 3 hours in the warehouse bathroom. I found a rusty razor and a bar of industrial soap. I shaved off the stubble that had grown over the last few days. I washed the grease and blood from my face and hands. I had a spare suit in the back of my truck kept there for funerals and unexpected city council meetings. It was charcoal gray, old-fashioned but high quality. I put it on. I tied my tie with steady hands. I polished my shoes with a rag. When I looked in the cracked mirror, I did not see a fugitive. I saw Michael Williams, structural safety inspector. I saw a man of rules of order, of unshakable integrity. I pulled out my phone one last time. I opened the voice recorder app. Leo, I said, my voice catching slightly. Hey buddy, it is Grandpa. If you are hearing this, it means I could not come to pick you up from school today. I want you to know that none of this is your fault. Your dad loves you. I love you. There are bad people in the world who build houses on sand, Leo. They look strong, but they crumble when the storm comes. You are built on rock. Be brave. Listen to Uncle Frank. And know that Grandpa fought for you until the very end. I saved the file and sent it to Frank. Then I walked out of the warehouse. The rain had stopped. The sky was turning a bruised purple in the east. I drove to the courthouse. I parked my truck right in front of the main entrance in a zone marked Judges Only. I did not care. I sat in the cab and waited. At 8:45, a black Mercedes pulled up. Vanessa stepped out. She looked radiant. She was wearing a navy blue power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She stopped on the steps to speak to her lawyer, a slick man named Sterling. No relation to the doctor, just another expensive shark. She looked confident, sad, and perfectly composed, the grieving daughter-in-law dealing with a senile tragedy. She did not see me. She did not expect me. In her mind, I was running through the woods or halfway to Mexico or dead in a ditch. She walked into the building. I gave her 5 minutes. Then I opened the truck door. I grabbed the red binder. I walked up the marble steps of the courthouse. The security guards at the metal detector recognized me. Their eyes went wide. They reached for their radios. "Mr. Williams," one of them stammered. "Sir, there is a warrant." "I know," I said calmly, placing the binder on the conveyor belt. "I am here for my hearing. I believe the court is expecting me." They were too stunned to arrest me on the spot. They let me pass, trailing behind me, speaking urgently into their headsets. I walked down the long, echoing hallway toward courtroom 4B. Inside, the hearing was already underway. I could hear Vanessa's lawyer speaking. "A tragic case of rapid deterioration, Your Honor. Mr. Williams has fled police custody, endangering himself and others. We ask that the temporary guardianship be made permanent immediately, so that we can locate him and provide the care he desperately needs." I reached the double oak doors. I did not knock. I did not wait for the bailiff. I pushed the doors open with both hands. They swung wide with a heavy, dramatic thud that silenced the room. Every head turned. Vanessa was sitting at the plaintiff's table, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. She froze. The handkerchief hovered in midair. Her face went slack, the mask slipping for the first time. I stood in the doorway, framed by the light from the hallway. I straightened my tie. I looked at the judge, Judge Miller, the golf buddy. I looked at Vanessa. And then I looked directly into the camera of the court reporter. "I object," I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years shouting over construction noise. "I am not lost, Your Honor, and I certainly do not need care, but I do have a delivery for the court." I walked down the center aisle, the red binder tucked under my arm. The silence was absolute. Vanessa stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He is dangerous," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Officer, arrest him. He is having a psychotic break." The bailiff moved toward me, his hand on his taser. "I would not do that," I said calmly, not breaking stride. "Unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator in a federal kidnapping case." I reached the front of the courtroom. I slammed the red binder down on the defense table. "My name is Michael Williams," I declared, turning to face the gallery. "And I am not the defendant today. I am the prosecution." I pulled out my phone and hit a single button. "Now, Elena," I whispered. High above the city, in the foothills of the Cascades, a SWAT team breached the gates of the Skyline Institute. And here in the courtroom, the real trial was just beginning. "Order, order in this court." Judge Miller's gavel banged against the mahogany block, the sound cracking like a pistol, shot through the tense air of courtroom 4B. But the noise did little to quell the chaos I had just unleashed. I stood at the defense table, my chest heaving slightly, beneath my gray suit, the red binder resting under my hand like a stone tablet. Across the aisle, Vanessa's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, was practically foaming at the mouth. He jabbed a manicured finger in my direction, his face turning a shade of puce that matched the heavy drapes behind the bench. "Your Honor, I demand you have the bailiff seize this man immediately," Sterling shouted, spraying spit onto his polished table. "Mr. Williams is a fugitive from justice. He escaped police custody yesterday. He is currently violating an active restraining order just by being in this room. He is dangerous, unstable, and clearly in the grip of a paranoid episode." Vanessa sat beside him, her composure recovering with terrifying speed. She looked at me not with fear, but with the pitying expression one might give a rabid dog that needs to be put down. "Michael," she said softly, her voice carrying perfectly to the judge. "Please, you need help. We just want to get you back to the hospital. You are confusing everyone." "I am not confused, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. "And I am not going back to the hospital." "Mr. Williams," Judge Miller boomed, leaning over the bench. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a man whose golf handicap was funded by people like Dr. Eris Thorne. "You have 30 seconds to explain why I should not hold you in contempt and remand you to the county jail without bail. You disrupted a legal proceeding. You are wanted for evasion." "I am here to answer the petition for guardianship," I said, ignoring the bailiff who was inching closer to my left. The petitioner claims I am incompetent because I believe my son is being held hostage. She claims I am paranoid because I believe she is stealing his fortune. If I can prove that my delusions are actually facts, then the petition is baseless, and I am free to go." "Is that not how the law works?" Sterling scoffed. "Your Honor, this is a waste of time. We have medical affidavits. I have new evidence," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Evidence that was not available yesterday because it was locked inside a fortress 40 miles from here." Vanessa laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, Michael, what did you find?" "Another receipt. A blurry photo, Your Honor." "My father-in-law has been stalking me. He is obsessed. My husband Lucas is currently in a secure facility in Switzerland, receiving treatment for a severe opioid addiction. That is the truth we have been trying to protect the family from. That is why he is unreachable." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document with a flourish. "I have a sworn statement here from the clinic in Zurich," she said, waving the paper. "Dated this morning, confirming Lucas Williams is a resident." I looked at the paper. It was a forgery. A good one probably, but a forgery. She had prepared for everything. "Switzerland," I repeated. "That is a long way from the Cascade foothills." "Your Honor, enough," Sterling barked. "Take him into custody." Judge Miller nodded, picking up his gavel again. "Mr. Williams, I have heard enough. Bailiff, take the respondent into—" The courtroom doors swung open again. This time it wasn't a desperate old man. It was a force of nature in a tailored black suit. Elena Rostova marched down the aisle, her heels clicking with the rhythm of impending doom. She held a laptop under one arm and a court order in the other. Behind her walked two uniformed state troopers, their presence instantly changing the energy in the room. "Your Honor, the state of Washington moves to intervene in this matter," Elena announced, her voice cutting through the noise like a laser. "Ms. Rostova," Judge Miller frowned. "This is a family court matter. The district attorney has no standing here." "We do when the subject of the guardianship petition is the whistleblower in an active RICO investigation," Elena said, slamming her paperwork down on my table next to the red binder. "And when the petitioner is the prime suspect in a federal kidnapping case." Vanessa's face went white. Sterling froze. "This is outrageous," Sterling sputtered. "What kidnapping? My client is a respected—" "Save it for the arraignment counsel," Elena snapped. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, 10 minutes ago, acting on exigent circumstances provided by Mr. Williams, a joint task force of SWAT and state police executed a raid on the Skyline Institute in Snoqualmie. We request permission to connect to the live tactical feed to determine the status of the protected person, Lucas Williams." "Objection," Sterling screamed. "This is prejudicial. You cannot bring unauthorized video into a competency hearing." "It goes to the heart of the respondent's mental state," Elena countered smoothly. "If Lucas Williams is in that facility, then Michael Williams is not insane. He is a hero. And if he is not, then arrest us both." Judge Miller looked at the troopers. He looked at Elena's furious determination. He looked at Vanessa, who was now gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. He knew the political winds had just shifted. If he blocked this, and it turned out to be true, his career was over. "I will allow it," Miller grunted. "But be quick." Elena plugged her laptop into the presentation port on the counsel table. The massive flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall behind the witness stand flickered to life. The courtroom went dead silent. The image was shaky at first, the body camera footage from a tactical officer. It showed rain mud and the blurred gray walls of a corridor. I recognized the carpet. It was the 3rd floor of Skyline. "Room 304, I whispered. On the screen, the officer kicked open a heavy door. "Police, get down, get down." The audio was chaotic, shouting the sound of glass breaking. The camera swung wildly, then focused. There, lying on the bed where I had left him only hours ago, was Lucas. He looked terrified, shielding his eyes from the tactical lights. A nurse was cowering in the corner. But what froze everyone in the courtroom was the man standing next to the bed, caught in the act of trying to inject something into Lucas's IV line. "Drop it!" the officer on the screen screamed. "Drop the syringe!" The man dropped it. He raised his hands. Even on the grainy video, the face was unmistakable. It was Dr. Eris Thorne, the director of the institute. "Secure him!" the voice on the video shouted. Then, the camera moved closer to the bed. The officer leaned in. "Sir, are you Lucas Williams?" My son looked into the lens. He looked weak, broken, and exhausted, but he nodded. "Yes," Lucas croaked. "I am Lucas. Get me out of here." The feed cut to a second camera angle outside the building. It showed paramedics loading Lucas onto a stretcher. He was alive. He was safe. In the courtroom, you could hear a pin drop. I turned to look at Vanessa. The mask was gone. The arrogance, the poise, the concerned daughter-in-law act, it had all evaporated. In its place was the raw, ugly face of a trapped animal. Her eyes darted to the exit, then to the bailiff, then back to me. That is not him," she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "That is an actor. This is a deepfake. Michael hired someone." "Stop," I said. It was not a shout. It was a command. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "The state requests that Vanessa Williams be remanded into custody, immediately pending charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud." "You have no proof I was involved," Vanessa shrieked, standing up. "Dr. Thorne must have gone rogue. I sent Lucas there for help. I didn't know." "We anticipated that defense," I said. I picked up the red binder. I opened it to the back cover. Taped there was a small black USB drive, a copy of the files Frank and I had compiled. But I did not need the USB drive for this. I had my phone. "You are right, Vanessa," I said, walking toward her. "The video only proves he was there. It does not prove you knew what they were doing to him. For that, we need to listen to your own words." "What are you talking about?" she hissed. "I found the bugs, Vanessa," I said. "The ones you put under my table, under my bed. You thought you were listening to a senile old man." I held up my phone. I had connected it to the courtroom's Bluetooth audio system while Elena was setting up the video. "But you forgot one thing about radio frequencies," I continued. "They work two ways. When Frank Blackwood and I isolated the frequency of your bugs, we did not just block them. We traced the receiver. It was a cloud server in your office. And guess what? You did not just use it to record me. You used the same server to store your voice memos, your insurance policy conversations with Dr. Thorne." I hit play. The sound of static filled the room, followed by a voice so clear it sounded like she was standing right next to the microphone. Vanessa's voice. "He is becoming a problem, Eris. He is starting to ask questions about the patent transfer." Dr. Thorne's voice. "The sedation is already at maximum safe levels, Vanessa. If we push it further, we risk respiratory failure." Vanessa's voice. "I do not care about safe levels. I need him compliant. If he cannot sign the papers, he is useless to me. Increase the dosage of the haloperidol. Scramble his brain if you have to. Make him a vegetable if that is what it takes. I can serve as his proxy if he is permanently incapacitated. Just do not kill him yet. I need the trust fund to vest first." The audio cut off. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a life being dismantled. The jurors in the box, though there were none. The gallery felt like a jury, gaped in horror. Sterling, her lawyer, slowly closed his briefcase and took a distinct step away from her, physically distancing himself from the radioactive fallout. Vanessa stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at the judge. Judge Miller was staring at her with a look of absolute revulsion. Even a corrupt judge has lines he will not cross, and conspiring to turn a husband into a vegetable for money was miles past that line. "Ms. Williams," Judge Miller said, his voice icy. "Sit down." "No," Vanessa whispered. She bolted. It was a desperate, irrational move. She spun on her heel and sprinted toward the side exit door, the one reserved for court staff. "Stop her!" Elena shouted. The bailiff, a large man who had been ready to tackle me 5 minutes ago, moved with surprising speed. He intercepted Vanessa just as she reached the gate. He grabbed her arm. "Let go of me!" she screamed, clawing at his face. "Do you know who I am? I own this city." "You are under arrest," the bailiff grunted, spinning her around and slamming her against the railing. He pulled her hands behind her back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Vanessa Williams," Elena recited, walking over to her. "You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it because you are going to need every ounce of breath for the next 20 years. I watched them drag her away. She was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Lucas, cursing the world that had finally dared to say no to her. Her hair had come loose from its bun, hanging in wild strands around her face. She looked like a demon being exorcised. As they hauled her through the rear doors, she locked eyes with me one last time. There was no remorse, only pure, unadulterated hate. I held her gaze. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I felt no joy, only a profound, exhausting relief. The door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. I turned back to the bench. Judge Miller looked at me. He looked at the red binder. He looked at the screen where the frozen image of my son was still displayed. "Mr. Williams," the judge said, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Regarding the petition for guardianship—" "I think we can consider it dismissed, Your Honor," I said quietly. "Dismissed with prejudice," Miller said quickly, banging the gavel. "And the restraining order is vacated immediately. Mr. Williams, you are free to go." I nodded. I gathered my papers. My hands were finally shaking again now that the adrenaline was leaving my system. Elena walked over to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. She did not say anything, she just squeezed a gesture of solidarity between two soldiers who had survived the trenches. "Go to him," she whispered. "My team will handle the paperwork. Go see your son." I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was empty. The morning sun was streaming through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The rain had stopped. The storm was over. I walked toward the elevators not as a fugitive, not as a victim, but as a father who had one last job to do. I had inspected the damage. I had identified the fault lines. And now the rebuilding could finally begin. It has been 6 months since the gavel fell in courtroom 4B. Spring has finally come to Seattle. The relentless gray rain that defined the worst week of my life has given way to a tentative pale sunshine that filters through the Douglas firs in my backyard. The rhododendrons are blooming, exploding in shades of pink and violent purple, reclaiming the garden that I had neglected during my descent into paranoia. I am sitting on the back porch, a mug of black coffee in my hand. It is not the nervous, jittery caffeine fix of a man hunting for spies. It is just coffee. Hot, bitter, and peaceful. Next to me, sitting in a lightweight titanium wheelchair, is Lucas. He is not the ghost I found in that sterile room at the Skyline Institute. The hollows in his cheeks have filled in. The waxen yellow pallor of long-term sedation has been replaced by the flush of wind and sun. His legs are still weak. The atrophy from 6 months of forced bed rest does not vanish overnight, but he is fighting. Every morning we go to the physical therapy center downtown. I watch him grit his teeth and sweat as he learns to trust his muscles again, forcing his body to remember the strength it once had. "Look at him," Lucas says softly, his voice clear and resonant, the raspy whisper of the drugs long gone. He points toward the lawn. Leo is there chasing a golden retriever puppy we adopted last week. The boy is laughing, a pure, unburdened sound that rises into the crisp air. For a long time, Leo was quiet, traumatized by the sudden disappearance of his mother and the chaos that swallowed his family. But children are resilient structures. If the foundation is good, they can weather almost any storm. We are rebuilding that foundation brick by brick, day by day. He looks happy, I reply. He is safe, Lucas corrects. He turns his head to look at me and his eyes. Sarah's eyes are filled with a complex mixture of gratitude and lingering pain. Because of you, I shake my head. I almost waited too long, Lucas. I almost let the rot take the whole house down. But you didn't, he says firmly. You found the cracks. We sit in silence for a moment, listening to the dog bark. The legal storm has passed, leaving a wreckage that the newspapers are still picking through. Vanessa Williams, the woman I once welcomed into my home, the mother of my grandson, is gone. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the raid, the audio recordings of her conspiring with Dr. Thorne, and the financial trail leading back to her shell companies. It was a landslide. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. She screamed when they read the verdict. She did not scream for forgiveness. She screamed that it was unfair, that she had been close to winning, that we were the villains for ruining her plans. Even at the end, her narcissism was a fortress that could not be breached. Dr. Eris Thorne and his staff at Skyline did not fare much better. The investigation revealed 12 other patients being held under similar circumstances, wealthy, inconvenient relatives tucked away in luxury cells. Thorne is looking at life in prison. The institute has been shuttered, the building seized by the state. I hear they plan to turn it into a public park. I hope they tear it down. Some foundations are too poisoned to build upon. Have you heard from Dean? Lucas asks, breaking my reverie. Dean, the delivery driver, the man in the rain. For weeks after the trial, his identity had been a mystery. But once the dust settled, I hired a new private investigator to find him. His name was Dean Miller. He was not a career hero. He was a former logistics manager for Vanessa's real estate firm who had been fired 2 days before he approached me. He had stumbled upon the care packages Vanessa was sending to the Skyline Institute and realized the truth. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage. He had every reason to walk away. He had been terrified of Vanessa, and rightly so. She had threatened to ruin anyone who crossed her. But he had seen a father sitting in a diner, oblivious to the fact that his son was being erased, and his conscience had overridden his fear. I saw him on Tuesday, I tell Lucas. I met him at the same diner. I gave him a check. How much? Enough to pay off his house and start that landscaping business he always wanted, I say. He tried to refuse it. Said he just did what was right. I told him that doing what is right when you are terrified is the definition of bravery. He saved your life, Lucas. If he hadn't handed me that package, if he hadn't warned me not to trust her, I might have signed those guardianship papers. We might both be locked away right now. Lucas nods slowly, his hand resting on the wheel of his chair. I owe him everything. We both do. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the grass. Leo tires of running and collapses in a heap, with the puppy giggling as the dog licks his face. I look at my son. We have a long road ahead. There are finances to untangle, trusts to restructure, and the emotional scars of betrayal to heal. Lucas wakes up screaming some nights, thinking he is back in that room with the unbreakable window. I still find myself checking the undersides of tables for microphones, a phantom itch I cannot quite scratch. But we are here. We are standing. I think about the man I was 6 months ago, the trusting, grieving widower who wanted to believe the lie because the truth was too painful. I wanted to believe Lucas was a hero in the Arctic because it was easier than believing my daughter-in-law was a monster. I wanted to believe Vanessa was caring for me because it was easier than admitting I was lonely. I made the mistake that so many people make. I confused comfort with safety. As a structural inspector, I knew that a coat of fresh paint could hide a rotting beam. I knew that a building could look magnificent on the outside, while the rebar inside was turning to dust. Yet, in my own life, I had stopped inspecting. I had let the maintenance slide. "You know what the hardest part is?" I ask quietly. Lucas looks at me. "What?" "Accepting that evil doesn't always look like a monster," I say. Vanessa didn't have horns. She had a nice smile. She made sure I took my vitamins. She remembered birthdays. She was the perfect daughter-in-law right up until the moment she decided we were worth more dead than alive. "She fooled everyone, Dad," Lucas says. "She fooled me and I married her." "But I should have seen it," I insist. "Sarah saw it. Your mother saw it. She tried to warn me and I dismissed her. That is my cross to bear." "Mom left us the map," Lucas says gently. "She hid the key. She wrote the will. She saved us too." He is right. Sarah is the silent hero of this story. Her love was not the passive, gentle kind. It was fierce, proactive, and suspicious. She practiced the ultimate form of self-preservation. She prepared for the worst to protect the people she loved. I stand up, my knees popping slightly. I have to do something. One last thing. I leave Lucas on the porch and walk into the house. It feels different now. We have swept it for bugs a dozen times. We have changed the locks. We have installed a security system that we control. It feels like ours again. I walk into the study and open the heavy steel safe in the corner. Inside, sitting on the velvet shelf, is the Hamilton watch. The crystal is still scratched. The jagged SOS is still visible, catching the light. I had thought about getting it repaired, replacing the glass, so it would look new again. But Lucas asked me not to. He said the scratches are part of the story now. They are the proof that he didn't give up. I pick up the watch. It is heavy, cool to the touch. Next to it, I place the red binder. The police returned it to me after the trial as a memento, though they kept digital copies for the records. It contains the logs of Lucas's torture, the evidence of my wife's murder investigation, and the blueprints of the tunnel I crawled through. I place the watch on top of the binder. I am not going to wear it. And Lucas is not going to wear it. Not yet. It belongs here in the dark, safe, and secure. It is a reminder. I close the heavy steel door. I spin the dial. Click. I lean my forehead against the cold metal of the safe. Self-preservation. It is a phrase that gets a bad reputation. People think it means selfishness. They think it means putting yourself above others. But they are wrong. Self-preservation is about structural integrity. You cannot hold up a roof if your walls are crumbling. You cannot protect your children if you are too blind to see the wolf standing in your kitchen. I spent my life ensuring that buildings were safe for people to live in. I checked the loads, the stresses, the materials. I did it because human life is fragile and gravity is unforgiving. But the most dangerous forces aren't gravity or wind or earthquakes. They are greed, envy, and deceit. And they don't attack the roof, they attack the foundation. I turn away from the safe and walk back toward the light of the hallway. I stop in front of the mirror in the foyer. I look at myself. I look older than I did 6 months ago. The lines around my eyes are deeper. My hair is whiter, but my eyes are clear. The fog of doubt is gone. I walk back out to the porch. Lucas is showing Leo how to throw a frisbee for the puppy. The plastic disc flies crookedly through the air, and the dog trips over its own paws trying to catch it. Laughter fills the yard. It is a good sound. It is the sound of a structure that has held. I lean against the railing and look out at the world. Don't be like the old Michael Williams. Don't let your desire for a happy ending blind you to the reality of the story you are in. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If a smile doesn't reach the eyes, don't trust the mouth. If your instincts are screaming that the load is too heavy, that the wall is bowing, that the foundation is cracking, listen to them. We live in a world where people will smile at you while they hold a knife behind their back. They will tell you they love you while they sign the papers to commit you. They will send you to the Arctic while they lock you in a room down the street. Trust is a beautiful thing, but trust must be earned and it must be verified. I watch my son. I watch my grandson. I am their inspector. I am their wall. And I will never ever let myself look away again. I look at you now. Yes, you. I know you want to believe that this is just a story. You want to believe that things like this don't happen in your neighborhood, in your family. You want to believe that the people you love would never do this to you. I hope you are right. But if a delivery driver ever hands you a package and tells you not to trust the person sleeping in the next room, open it. Open it immediately. Because the only thing more terrifying than finding out the truth is living a lie until it buries you. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it serves as a reminder to trust your instincts and protect those you love. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you safe at home on your commute, or maybe working late? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Bittersweet Revenge, like this video. And if you really want to support the channel, hit that hype button so this warning can reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never ignore the cracks in the wall.